Even after the breakup headlines faded, one name continues to quietly echo through the life of a global rock icon: Dakota Johnson. Yes, despite reports that their relationship has ended, Dakota Johnson's presence is still said to linger in the world of Chris Martin. And the truth behind it is far more emotional, layered, and compelling than most people realize. Before diving deeper, make sure to stay engaged and share this story, because what unfolds reveals a rare and human side of celebrity life that often goes unseen. Chris Martin, the frontman of Coldplay, has long been admired for his introspective songwriting and calm public persona. While his music fills stadiums and dominates global charts, his private life has always been carefully guarded. That changed subtly when he began a relationship with Dakota Johnson, the Hollywood actress known for her versatility, quiet strength, and growing influence in the film industry. Their relationship was never loud, never performative, yet it captured intense public curiosity precisely because of its privacy. Although multiple sources have indicated that Chris Martin and Dakota Johnson have gone their separate ways, those close to the singer suggest her name still surfaces in moments that matter. Not as controversy, not as regret, but as someone who left a lasting emotional imprint. Dakota was not merely a romantic partner. She was described as a confidant, a grounding presence, and someone who understood Chris Martin beyond the spotlight. Behind the sold-out concerts and uplifting anthems, Chris Martin's personal life has reportedly taken on a quieter tone since the separation. Observers have noted subtle changes. His recent appearances feel more reflective. New Coldplay material carries deeper emotional layers, with lyrics that hint at vulnerability, growth, and unresolved feelings. Fans, as always, listen closely, searching for meaning between the lines. Meanwhile, Dakota Johnson has continued to move forward with remarkable composure. She remains focused on her acting career, appearing at major film festivals, taking on complex roles, and avoiding public commentary about her personal life. Yet she has not erased the past. In select interviews, Dakota has spoken about relationships that shape who you become, connections that don't end in bitterness, and love that teaches rather than destroys. Many believe these words quietly reference her time with Chris Martin. This is where public curiosity intensifies. If the relationship is truly over, why does Dakota Johnson's name still seem intertwined with Chris Martin's narrative? Why do fans and insiders continue to draw connections between his emotional evolution and her influence? The questions persist, fueling speculation while no clear answers are offered. Industry insiders emphasize that the breakup itself was notably calm. No scandals. No public arguments. No dramatic statements. Just a mutual decision to step onto separate paths. In an entertainment world often defined by chaos and spectacle, this quiet ending stood out. And perhaps that is why the story refuses to fade. Midway through this unfolding narrative, a detail emerged that caught many by surprise. Sources revealed that Dakota Johnson was among the first people to hear early versions of Coldplay's recent songs, even after the relationship had reportedly ended. It was a small revelation, yet deeply symbolic. It suggested a bond that had transformed rather than disappeared. This moment shifted the entire perception of their story. It became less about heartbreak and more about emotional continuity. Not all relationships end with closed doors. Some simply change shape. Dakota Johnson may no longer be Chris Martin's partner, but her role in his emotional journey appears to remain significant. As the story builds toward its emotional peak, one truth becomes increasingly clear. Dakota Johnson is not just a chapter Chris Martin has closed. She represents a meaningful period of growth, vulnerability, and connection. In a culture obsessed with dramatic breakups and quick rebounds, this story resonates because it feels real, restrained, and deeply human. Today, both Chris Martin and Dakota Johnson continue forward independently. There has been no confirmation of reconciliation, nor any definitive statements dismissing future possibilities. Instead, there is a shared silence that speaks volumes. A silence filled with respect, maturity, and unspoken understanding, and perhaps that is the real takeaway. Even after the breakup, Dakota Johnson's name still lingers in Chris Martin's life, not as a shadow, but as a reminder of a love that once mattered, a connection that left its mark. Stories like this do not always end. Sometimes, they simply evolve. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts. Do you believe certain relationships ever truly end, or do they quietly remain part of who we become? The narrative surrounding Chris Martin and Dakota Johnson continues to unfold in subtle yet powerful ways, refusing to settle into a simple conclusion. As time passes, the distance between them in public appearances grows clearer, yet the emotional connection suggested by those closest to them remains a topic of quiet discussion. For Chris Martin, whose music has always served as a mirror of his inner world, the influence of past relationships has never truly disappeared. Instead, it often resurfaces in melodies, lyrics, and moments of silence between the notes. Those familiar with Chris Martin's creative process explain that he writes not only from present emotions, but from memory. Relationships that once shaped his sense of stability and vulnerability tend to leave a permanent imprint. Dakota Johnson, according to multiple sources, belongs firmly in that category. She entered his life during a phase of reflection and personal recalibration, and her presence coincided with a noticeable shift toward emotional clarity and balance. During their time together, Chris Martin was frequently described as calmer, more grounded, and more open to stillness. Friends observed that he valued quieter routines, private moments away from the spotlight, and deeper conversations that went beyond the surface of fame. Dakota Johnson, known for her thoughtful and introspective nature, was often credited with encouraging that space. The result was a relationship that felt less performative and more intimate, a rarity in the world of high-profile celebrities. After their separation, that sense of introspection did not vanish. Instead, it intensified. Chris Martin's recent interviews, while avoiding direct references to his personal life, reveal a man deeply focused on growth, gratitude, and emotional honesty. He speaks often about learning from love, accepting impermanence, and embracing change without resentment. To many observers, these reflections feel connected to the relationship he shared with Dakota Johnson. At the same time, Dakota Johnson's path forward has been equally telling. Her career choices have leaned toward emotionally complex roles, characters shaped by internal conflict, resilience, and quiet strength. In press appearances, she carries a composed confidence, avoiding sensationalism while projecting depth. She rarely addresses her personal life directly, yet her words about love, connection, and emotional maturity resonate strongly with those familiar with her past relationship. What continues to fascinate the public is the absence of bitterness. In a culture conditioned to expect dramatic fallout, public feuds, or carefully crafted narratives of blame, the silence between Chris Martin and Dakota Johnson feels almost radical. There have been no attempts to rewrite history, no efforts to diminish what they once shared. Instead, both appear to honor the past by refusing to exploit it. This restraint has only amplified curiosity. Fans analyze song lyrics, interview quotes, and body language, searching for hidden meaning. Each new Coldplay release is examined through an emotional lens, with listeners wondering whether certain lines are reflections of unresolved feelings or simply echoes of a chapter that once mattered deeply. The speculation persists not because of scandal, but because of sincerity. Industry insiders suggest that the relationship ended due to timing, life priorities, and the realities of demanding careers rather than a lack of affection. When two people operate at the highest levels of global fame, maintaining alignment can become increasingly difficult. Yet even when paths diverge, respect and emotional understanding can remain intact. This perspective reframes the entire story. Rather than a tale of heartbreak, it becomes a narrative about evolution. Love, in this context, is not defined by permanence but by impact. Dakota Johnson's influence on Chris Martin may no longer be visible in public moments, but it appears to persist in quieter ways, shaping how he approaches creativity, relationships, and self-awareness. As the story approaches its emotional core, one realization stands out. Not every meaningful relationship is meant to last forever, but that does not diminish its value. Some connections exist to teach, to stabilize, and to transform. When they end, they leave behind wisdom rather than wounds. The bond between Chris Martin and Dakota Johnson seems to fall into that rare category. Today, Chris Martin continues to tour the world, connecting with millions through music that speaks to hope, healing, and shared humanity. Dakota Johnson continues to expand her presence in film, choosing projects that challenge and inspire. Their lives move forward independently, yet their shared past remains a quiet reference point rather than a closed-doored eye. In the end, the reason Dakota Johnson's name still lingers in discussions about Chris Martin is simple. Their relationship mattered. It shaped a moment in time, influenced creative expression, and demonstrated that love does not need to be loud to be profound. Even after separation, its echoes can remain, not as a source of pain, but as a reminder of something real, and perhaps that is why this story continues to resonate. In a world obsessed with endings, this one offers something different. It suggests that some relationships never truly disappear. They transform, settle into memory, and quietly influence who we become. For Chris Martin, Dakota Johnson may no longer walk beside him, but the mark she left on his life appears to endure, written not in headlines, but in the spaces between words, melodies, and moments of reflection. As the public continues to speculate, the story surrounding Chris Martin and Dakota Johnson grows not louder, but deeper. It becomes less about headlines and more about interpretation. Observers now view their past relationship not as a closed chapter, but as a defining era that quietly reshaped both individuals. For Chris Martin in particular, whose artistry has always been intertwined with emotional truth, the impact of that era appears to surface in ways that cannot be staged or denied. Those close to the Coldplay frontman describe a man who has become increasingly intentional with his energy. He chooses silence over spectacle, reflection over reaction. In private settings, Chris Martin is said to revisit moments of personal growth, often crediting past relationships for teaching him emotional responsibility and patience. Dakota Johnson's role in that process is consistently described as significant, not because of drama, but because of stability during their relationship. Insiders say Dakota offered something Chris deeply valued: emotional safety without control. She was present without pressure, supportive without intrusion. In an industry where expectations are relentless and public scrutiny never sleeps, that balance was rare. Even after their separation, that dynamic appears to have left a lasting impression on how Chris Martin navigates intimacy and trust. Public appearances following the breakup subtly reflect this shift. Chris Martin's demeanor remains warm, yet more inward-looking. His interactions feel measured, thoughtful, as if shaped by lessons learned rather than wounds left behind. When asked about love or relationships in interviews, his responses are philosophical rather than personal, suggesting a man who has processed loss not through bitterness, but understanding. Dakota Johnson, on the other hand, continues to embody a quiet confidence that has become her signature. She avoids the spotlight when it veers toward intrusion, yet speaks with clarity when addressing themes of emotional growth. In conversations about love, she often emphasizes authenticity, mutual respect, and the importance of timing. These reflections align closely with what insiders describe as the core reason their relationship ended: not a lack of love, but a divergence in life rhythms. This context adds another layer to the story. It suggests that the end of their relationship was not a failure, but a natural transition. Two people evolving at different speeds, in different directions, yet carrying forward what they learned together. In that sense, Dakota Johnson's continued presence in narratives surrounding Chris Martin is not surprising. It reflects emotional continuity rather than unresolved attachment. Fans, meanwhile, remain deeply invested. Social media discussions frequently revisit moments from their past, not in a nostalgic sense, but with curiosity about how such a quiet, grounded relationship could leave such a lasting impression. Each new Coldplay performance, each reflective lyric, reignites conversation. Listeners search for emotional fingerprints, convinced that certain songs carry echoes of personal truth. Music critics have also noted a tonal shift in Coldplay's recent work. The themes of healing, acceptance, and emotional clarity feel more pronounced. While no direct references are ever made, the emotional maturity embedded in the music suggests lived experience rather than abstract inspiration. For longtime fans, this evolution feels both familiar and new, reinforcing the idea that personal growth often fuels creative depth. As time moves forward, the absence of closure statements from either Chris Martin or Dakota Johnson becomes a statement in itself. Their silence communicates respect. It implies that some stories do not need public conclusions to be complete. Instead of rewriting their past or distancing themselves from it, both appear to honor it quietly. Industry observers believe this approach has preserved their individual reputations while elevating the narrative beyond tabloid culture. Rather than being remembered for a dramatic breakup, their relationship is increasingly seen as an example of emotional maturity in the public eye. A reminder that love does not have to end in conflict to be meaningful. Approaching the emotional payoff of this story, one truth stands out clearly. Dakota Johnson's name continues to surface in Chris Martin's life because their connection reached beyond romance. It influenced how he experiences stillness, how he processes change, and how he channels emotion into art. That kind of impact does not disappear when a relationship ends. Today, Chris Martin stands on global stages, delivering songs that resonate with millions. Dakota Johnson stands firmly in her own creative space, choosing projects that reflect depth and independence. Their lives no longer intersect publicly, yet the resonance of their shared past remains quietly acknowledged, and that is perhaps the most compelling element of this entire story. In a world driven by constant updates and dramatic revelations, this narrative endures precisely because it refuses to be sensationalized. It unfolds slowly, thoughtfully, and authentically. It reminds audiences that some relationships do not fade into obscurity when they end. Instead, they settle into memory, shaping perspective and influencing growth long after the final goodbye. In the end, the reason Dakota Johnson's presence still seems to shadow Chris Martin's life is not rooted in longing or regret. It is rooted in meaning. Their relationship mattered. It left an imprint. And as both continue forward, that imprint remains a quiet testament to a connection that was real, transformative, and deeply human. As months pass and new chapters unfold in both of their lives, the narrative surrounding Chris Martin and Dakota Johnson continues to gain emotional weight rather than fade away. What keeps this story alive is not constant sightings or public statements, but the consistency of its undertone, quiet significance. In an industry where relationships often burn fast and end loudly, their story stands apart, defined by restraint, mutual respect, and emotional depth. Sources close to Chris Martin suggest that his current mindset is heavily influenced by reflection rather than reinvention. He is not attempting to erase the past or replace it with something new. Instead, he is integrating it. Those who work closely with him describe a creative process that has become more introspective, less driven by urgency and more by meaning. Music, for Chris, has once again become a space to process life rather than escape it. Dakota Johnson's role in that evolution is often mentioned indirectly. Not as a muse in the traditional sense, but as a catalyst for emotional awareness. During their relationship, Chris reportedly learned to sit with discomfort, to slow down, and to acknowledge vulnerability without immediately turning it into performance. These lessons, according to insiders, stayed with him long after the relationship ended. Public perception has also shifted. What was once framed as a celebrity romance is now increasingly viewed as a formative partnership. Fans no longer focus solely on whether they might reunite, but on how the relationship shaped both individuals. Online discussions reflect this change, emphasizing emotional maturity over romantic speculation. The story has evolved from gossip into something closer to a case study of love lived quietly in the public eye. Dakota Johnson, meanwhile, continues to demonstrate a clear sense of personal direction. Her recent interviews reveal a woman comfortable with ambiguity, unafraid of emotional complexity. She speaks openly about growth, about learning when to hold on and when to let go. Though she never names Chris Martin directly, her reflections often align closely with the themes associated with their time together professionally. Dakota appears more selective, gravitating toward projects that explore layered characters and internal conflict. Critics have praised her performances for their restraint and authenticity, qualities that mirror how she has handled her personal life. There is no sense of reinvention fueled by heartbreak. Instead, there is continuity, as if she carried the relationship forward as experience rather than burden. This parallel growth is what makes their story compelling. Both have moved on, yet neither appears diminished by the ending. If anything, they seem more grounded. That outcome challenges the usual narrative surrounding celebrity breakups, which often centers on loss, conflict, or rivalry. In this case, the lasting impression is one of mutual elevation. As the timeline extends, the absence of definitive closure continues to intrigue the public. There is no final statement, no clear emotional endpoint. And perhaps that is intentional. Some relationships do not conclude with punctuation. They fade into ellipses, lingering in memory, influencing future choices in subtle ways. Music journalists analyzing Coldplay's recent work have noted an increased emphasis on emotional clarity and acceptance. The tone feels less urgent, more reflective. While no song is explicitly autobiographical, the emotional landscape suggests a man at peace with transition. Listeners sense that these songs come from lived experience rather than imagined emotion. The same can be said for Dakota Johnson's public presence. She appears neither guarded nor exposed, maintaining a balance that feels intentional. She acknowledges the past without revisiting it, allowing it to exist without defining her present. This approach has earned her respect not only as an actress, but as a public figure navigating fame with dignity. As the story reaches its deeper emotional resonance, one conclusion becomes unavoidable. The reason Dakota Johnson's name continues to surface in conversations about Chris Martin is not because of unresolved romance, but because of unresolved significance. Some connections do not end cleanly because they are not meant to. They transform into reference points, into emotional landmarks that shape perspective long after the relationship itself has ended. In private conversations, those close to Chris Martin describe a man who speaks of love as something cumulative rather than disposable. Each relationship adds to understanding, not failure. Dakota Johnson, in that sense, represents a chapter that contributed meaningfully to who he is today. Not an interruption, but a foundation. Today, as Coldplay continues its global presence and Dakota Johnson expands her creative reach, their paths remain separate yet connected by shared history. There is no visible tension, no attempt to rewrite the narrative. Just two individuals moving forward with clarity, shaped but not defined by what they once shared. Ultimately, this is why the story refuses to disappear. It offers a rare alternative to the usual celebrity breakup narrative. It suggests that love can end without collapsing, that separation does not always equal loss, and that some relationships leave behind something far more enduring than headlines. Even now, long after the relationship is said to have ended, Dakota Johnson's name still echoes quietly in the life of Chris Martin. Not as a reminder of what was lost, but as proof of something that mattered deeply, taught valuable lessons, and continues to influence the way both approach love, creativity, and life itself. And as this quiet story continues to stretch across time, it becomes increasingly clear why it refuses to dissolve into the background of celebrity history. The connection between Chris Martin and Dakota Johnson did not rely on spectacle, and that is precisely why its residue feels so enduring. It existed in shared routines, emotional understanding, and a mutual desire for privacy in a world that rarely allows it. People close to Chris Martin describe how certain habits formed during that relationship still remain. He is said to be more deliberate with solitude, more selective with emotional access, and more mindful of balance between work and personal life. These are not traits that emerge overnight, nor do they disappear simply because a relationship ends. They are learned behaviors, carried forward as part of personal evolution. What stands out most is how Chris Martin now speaks about happiness. In recent conversations, he frames it not as a destination tied to romance, but as an internal state shaped by acceptance and gratitude. He often emphasizes emotional health, presence, and kindness toward oneself. To longtime followers, this philosophy marks a noticeable shift, one that aligns closely with the period he spent with Dakota Johnson. Dakota, meanwhile, continues to reflect a similar emotional maturity. Her public persona remains consistent, grounded, thoughtful, and resistant to oversharing. She rarely addresses rumors, choosing instead to let her work speak for itself. Yet when she does touch on themes of love and relationships, her words suggest someone who values depth over permanence. Someone who understands that meaningful connections do not lose their value simply because they change form. This shared emotional language is what keeps their story alive in public consciousness. It is not driven by nostalgia alone, but by recognition. Many people see themselves reflected in a relationship that ended quietly, respectfully, and without erasure. In that sense, Chris Martin and Dakota Johnson represent a narrative that feels more relatable than most celebrity romances. As conversations continue online and among fans, the focus has shifted away from speculation about reconciliation. Instead, there is growing appreciation for how both handled the end of their relationship. The lack of public conflict has reframed the story entirely. Rather than asking what went wrong, people now ask what went right, and what can be learned from it. Music analysts continue to examine Coldplay's evolving sound, noting how themes of renewal, peace, and emotional balance dominate recent releases. These are not the sounds of unresolved turmoil, but of integration. Of someone who has processed change and allowed it to inform creativity without consuming it. In that process, past relationships naturally become part of the emotional archive. Dakota Johnson's career trajectory mirrors this sense of integration. She chooses roles that explore inner worlds rather than external chaos. Characters shaped by quiet strength, unresolved emotion, and personal reckoning. Critics often highlight her restraint, her ability to convey depth without excess. It is a quality that feels consistent with how she has navigated her personal life. The story reaches its most meaningful point here. Not in a dramatic revelation, but an understanding. Dakota Johnson's name continues to be associated with Chris Martin because their relationship functioned as a turning point rather than a detour. It did not derail either of them. It refined them. In private circles, the relationship is often described as transformative rather than traumatic. That distinction matters. Trauma demands closure. Transformation simply becomes part of who you are. And that is why, even after separation, the emotional presence of that connection remains intact. Today, both figures continue to inspire through their work rather than their personal lives. Chris Martin fills stadiums with music centered on unity and hope. Dakota Johnson commands screens with performances rooted in authenticity. Their individual successes are not reactions to the past, but continuations of growth that began long before and were shaped, in part, by each other. As time goes on, the story is likely to become even quieter. Fewer references. Less speculation. But its essence will remain. Not because of unfinished business, but because of lasting influence. Some relationships do not need to be revisited to be remembered. They live on in perspective, in choices, and in creative expression, and so, even now, the narrative holds. Despite the breakup, Dakota Johnson's name still gently shadows the life of Chris Martin. Not as an unanswered question, but as an answered one. Proof that love can exist without permanence, that connection can outlast presence, and that the most meaningful relationships are often the ones that end without noise, yet leave behind the deepest imprint.